Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
It's all relative, right? I mean, is there anything really true across all cultures and times and places? Or put it another way, are there any acts that are immoral everywhere, or is it just up to the habits and practices of each society? My name is Cy Kellen. I am your host, and our topic this hour, Your Truth, My Truth, How to Understand and Refute Relativistic Thinking. 888-318-7884 is the number if you have a question about relativism or would like some help tackling that troublesome philosophy of our time. 888-318-7884. If you think the truth is relative, whether truth in general or just morals, give us a call. If you've been talking to relativists and you want to know how to engage them, you can also give us a call on that count. Maybe a relativist has asked an argument of you or proposed an argument to you for his relativism and you need some help answering. Well, Carlo Broussard, staff apologist here at Catholic Answers and the maker of Your Truth, My Truth, How to Understand and Refute Relativistic Thinking, is with us here today. Hi, Carlo.
Hey, Cy. How are you, buddy?
I am very, very well. I'm
fantastic.
I'm looking forward to this because I do think this is this is in many ways the topic of our times.
Sure, it is. It's very prevalent in our culture. We see it front and center with the whole transgender issue, the idea that rather than conforming to what is real, to reality, I make my own reality. There can be no false perception of reality because there's basically no reality to perceive, but only a reality to create. We find ourselves in our culture where we're divorcing ourselves from the objective standard of human nature.
Yeah.
And it's leading down the road where we're able to, so-called, define who we are according to our subjective desires and what we might feel, and thus leading to the practice of transforming our bodies in order to try and meet and be in harmony with those desires, subjective desires that we have. So we see relativism front and center in the whole transgender issue, as well as just with sexuality in general, that there's no inherent meaning to human sexuality that we should reverence and that we should respect, for we determine what is good and bad sexual behavior as opposed to good and bad sexual behavior being determined by human nature and what nature ordains our sexuality toward and the intrinsic purposes of sexuality, etc. So, these are some of the contemporary issues where we see relativism manifesting itself very explicitly. And that would be kind of like intellectual relativism. There's really no truth whatsoever pertaining to our nature, our gender, or our sexuality, etc. And then that would also carry over into moral relativism as well, because the intellectual relativism ultimately leads to moral relativism, because if there is no absolute truth whatsoever, well then there's no absolute truth about what I ought to do, what is good, appropriate human behavior, and what is bad or inappropriate human behavior. So there's a distinction that we can make between intellectual relativism, there's no truth or no absolute truth in general, and then moral relativism, which states there's no moral absolute truths. Some philosophers call it local relativism because it localizes it to the area of morality as opposed to just truth in general, you see. Now, they're intrinsically related. One leads to the other, but there is a distinction to be made, and I'm sure we'll be addressing these different forms of relativism throughout today's show.
Maybe you're wondering about truth. Maybe you yourself are uncertain whether some things are true and some things are false, particularly in the moral realm, but maybe just in the, as Carlo was saying, in the general realm of intellect. 888-318-7884 is the number, or to put that in spelling, 888-31-TRUTH. 888-31-TRUTH is that number. And Carlo, one of my heroes, Walker Percy, he actually comes from down your way. He's from a philosopher and novelist from Louisiana, and he says this kind of thinking is apocalyptic. and I think what he means by that is that if there's nothing true, then the human person is no longer safe. That anything can be done and will be
correct.
done. People, and so that you lose the kind of social cohesion that you need for people to flourish.
There has to be an objective standard that would apply to all human beings in order for us to fulfill our natural end of being social, rational animals, right? We are social beings, and in order to relate to one another in a peaceful and harmonizing way, there must be an objective standard. And in our Catholic tradition, and even just, not even the Catholic tradition, but dating all the way back to Aristotle himself, there is an objective standard, namely human nature. And because we're all human beings, we all have a human nature, there's a certain order to human nature, and the good, what is good for us, given our nature as human beings, is determined by the various ends for the sake of which our natural faculties exist, and what nature orders those powers toward, the achievement of which is good for us, the frustration of which is bad, and that can be a basis or a ground that applies to all human beings, as opposed to morality being contingent upon a person's or an individual's subjective judgment, which becomes arbitrary. And that's going to be reduced to might makes right. Because whenever there's a conflict in moral views of what is true, what is false, what is right, what is wrong, the only view that's going to win the day is the view that has the one who holds the view, the one that holds the view that has the most power.
Yep. So again, we're not safe then. But you know what? I don't think there's often a well-developed intellectual argument, but there's often this kind of thing. Well, Carlo, you know what? You're just not comfortable with gray areas. You're just not comfortable with the fact that the things aren't that clear.
Right. Well, just because that would be a non sequitur in philosophy.
Oh, I thought I was being so smart too, Carlo.
Just because there are some things that we might not be able to come to the knowledge of the truth about, it doesn't follow that there is no objective truth. In philosophy, we would say that's a difference. There's a difference there between epistemology, which has to do with coming to know things, our knowledge of things, and ontology, or a metaphysical aspect, which has to do with the reality of things, whether the thing is real or not. So just because we might disagree, it doesn't follow that there is no objective truth. Just because there might be some gray areas where we don't have absolute certainty about a particular behavior, a particular thing, it doesn't mean that there is no objective truth about the matter. And then, of course, we could respond and say, well, there are some things that are clear about what is good and what is bad for us as human beings. We're ordered to self-preservation. So to take our life, would be not good for us. It's good for us to eat food and to drink in order for us to nourish our bodies, to continue living. We're ordered towards reproduction, right, and the continuation of the species. Our sexual powers are ordered towards certain ends, the achievement of which is good, the intentional frustration of which is bad. And then as rational beings, we're not just animals. In the philosophy world, we say we're rational animals, which means we have certain rational powers or faculties that are ordered towards certain ends. We're made to know the truth. We're made to act freely without physical coercion. We're made to love. The achievement of these things, truth, love, choosing the good, acting freely, these are good for us given our nature as human beings. The frustration of these things, if I lie to you, that's not good for you, right? You're going to be ticked off. You're not going to be a happy man.
Right.
Why? Because you're made for the truth. And to intentionally frustrate you from achieving that ultimate goal or end is not good for you. So there are some things that are clear, given the order of human nature, and thus we can discern what is good, what is bad, and develop a morality, a system of morality that's objective and grounded in human nature. We call that the natural moral law.
888-318-7884 is the number. Your Truth, My Truth. How to understand and refute relativistic thinking is our topic this hour. If you want to challenge Carlo's idea that some things are true and some things are false, some things are good, some things are bad, we're happy to take that challenge. Or if you would just like help addressing that kind of prevailing view in our society that no, everything is just relative, we'd be happy to help. 888-318-7884. Give us a call. We'll be right back to take your calls on Catholic Answers Live.
Don't you just love listening to Carlo Broussard? Did you know you can book Carlo or any of our other great speakers to speak at your parish or special event? Contact one of our seminar coordinators through the Speakers Bureau section on Catholic.com today to find out more information. It may be true for you, but not for me. How often have you heard this during a discussion with friends or family? Whether talking about faith, morality, politics, or just the basic notion of truth, so many people are captive to the notion of relativism, the belief that reality is something we decide. In his new audio presentation, Your Truth, My Truth, apologist Carlo Broussard breaks down this intellectual cancer, looking at the different kinds of relativism we regularly encounter and demonstrating how, ultimately, they collapse under the weight of their own incoherence. More importantly, Carlo makes a powerful case for the existence of objective truth, showing you how to explain to others that right and wrong are both real and universal, because it was designed that way by God. Order your copy of Your Truth, My Truth by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
The Catholic Answers Minute. I'm Father Vincent Serpa. In Matthew 5:17, Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill." It is in the fulfilling of the law and prophets that he challenges all who hear him. He did not intend to fulfill the law by beginning with outward observance, as his fellow Jews were accustomed to expect. From this point forward, fulfillment of the law had to come from inside the person. Mere outward observance in itself would not be sufficient. Outward observance would have to reflect an inner disposition. So often he charged the scribes and Pharisees with appearing blameless on the outside, but inside being full of corruption and deceit. The kingdom of God demands much more. It demands purity of heart. Blessed are the pure of heart, he was to say, for they shall see God. To have a pure heart is to prefer nothing to him. I'm Father Vincent Serpa for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Your Truth, My Truth, how to understand and refute relativistic thinking. That is our topic today. Carlo Broussard, staff apologist here at Catholic Answers, is our guest. And I did forget to mention this. Anyone who gets on the air today with Carlo is going to receive a free copy of Carlo's CD, Your Truth, My Truth, How to Understand and Refute Relativistic Thinking. So you're definitely going to want to pick up that phone and call 888-318-7884. And if you don't get on the air with them, it's just it's less than $10 on Catholic.com. You go to shop.catholic.com. And included with the CD are instructions to download the 38-page study guide.
Yeah,
Come on, Carlo. You're just giving that away for free?
It's a little booklet, a PDF booklet that goes through the various critiques. It teaches you how to critique relativism in both its global form, or intellectual relativism, and even in its local form with regard to morality. And then it provides help on how to counter some of the arguments that relativists will give in order to substantiate their claim. So, for example, the argument from tolerance, well, if you believe in absolute truth, you're being intolerant. Or how can I believe in absolute truth when there are so many different opinions out there, right? People believe so many different things. How can I know absolute truth exists? We should be able to believe whatever we want as long as we don't hurt somebody. That's one common argument that we hear out there in modern culture, that we need to be equipped to be able to sift through reasonably, acknowledge maybe perhaps some of the half-truth that's there, but then also be able to show where it's inconsistent as well. So these are some of the things that I go through. And then I also teach you how to defend for example, the principle of non-contradiction, a fundamental principle of reason, something cannot be and not be in the same respect, same place and time. How you can defend that to show that that's at least one thing that's absolutely true, right? And then upon that, we can build knowledge. And then also what I was talking about earlier, Si, the objectivity of moral truth grounded in human nature. So I in one of the chapters in the study guide, I talk about that as well.
888-318-7884 is the number. Your Truth, My Truth, How to Understand and Refute Relativistic Thinking is going out free to everyone who gets on the air with Carlo. And the first one will be, as far as I know anyways, John in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on KVSS. John, you are on with Carlo Broussard.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for taking my call. The other day, I have a son who is in college, and he was arguing with me that there is the justification for moral relativism, and that he didn't believe in that there were any moral absolutes. And I was just searching for some information how to refute his discussion.
Sure. Well, if you're looking for some resources, John, just right off the bat, I would encourage a shameless plug here, of which Si was just introducing my talk, my audio CD, Your Truth, My Truth, along with the study guide. And in the study guide, I give you several ways that you can critique both intellectual relativism and moral relativism. And then there's also a great book out there, John, and the title of the book is Feet Firmly Planted in Mid-Air. It's Relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Mid-Air by Francis Beckwith and Gregory Kokel. It's a great book it's an exhaustive treatment of relativism and teaching you how to respond to it in all its various different forms. But I think, John, fundamentally, what you have to do is try to share with your son examples that he would intuitively already acknowledge to be a moral absolute. So you could use the example of what Hitler did in Nazi Germany in exterminating the Jews. You could use the example of slavery. This is one way. You can appeal to his moral intuition and say, hey, look, John, you can say, look, son, if you really believe that moral truths and what is good, what is bad is only relative to what an individual happens to think, well, then we couldn't accuse Hitler of wrongdoing. We couldn't accuse our government of this previous slavery laws of wrongdoing. Fundamentally, if moral truth is not absolute but only relative, well then we couldn't accuse anybody of any wrongdoing. Why? Because the individual would be the final arbiter of what is good and what is bad. So ultimately, John, you can show your son that moral relativism undermines morality completely. And that's something that's so absurd, I think even he will come to see that, well, I might be a moral relativist in my thinking, but in practice, I'm not a moral relativist. Because, John, you can just turn the tables on your son and say, well, okay, son, hypothetically, how would you feel if, I would lock you up and put you in a room and starve you to death, right? I mean, that's an absurd example, but fundamentally, if moral relativism were true and you perceive that to be correct and right for you, well, then you couldn't be accused of wrongdoing, right? So you want to take the logic of moral relativism and apply it to other examples where he'll intuitively acknowledge to be so absurd that he must give up moral relativism. So that's one way among many that you could go about critiquing it, by showing it undermines morality completely, making it impossible to accuse another of wrongdoing. What do you think of that, John?
That sounds good. I was trying to approach it from an intellectual aspect. He's in college, and he still attends Mass. He's a believer, but right. I'm trying to approach this intellectually rather than just trying to say, well, God said so, that's the reason why.
And John, I couldn't agree more. I think it's very important that we show them that this is something we don't need the Bible to know. Does the Bible give us absolute moral truths? Yes. Praise be Jesus Christ for that, because a lot of times we have a mixture of error. But these are things that we can come to know by the natural light of human reason. And once again, if you get the resources that I mentioned at the outset of our conversation, John, you'll see that there is a very, very strong intellectual basis for the objectivity of moral truth. So thanks for your call, John.
Thank you, John, and we'll be sending you Your Truth, My Truth, How to Understand and Refute Relativistic Thinking. I'm sure that will be helpful. We go to Ron in Wintersville, Ohio, listening on God's Word. Is that right, Ron?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
very good.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This must be Father-Son's Day, because I was with my adult son just last week, and it's an aspect of relativism and sort of it's syncretism, I guess, is that he has many friends who say, all I need is a relationship with Jesus, and, religion is so divisive,
Right.
so I don't need to be part of a church. Some actually do attend some Protestant churches, but a good number of them don't. And I wondered if there's some audio resource that would be good for him to listen to in a nice way. Obviously, these are his friends, but he wants to sort of help work with them as well.
All right. So what you're saying is that this idea of relativism seems to have in some way made its way into these particular forms of Christianity, and the argument being, because religion is so divisive, well, then I don't really need to belong to any religion, but I just need to believe in Jesus. Is that the gist of it?
Me and Jesus. Just me and Jesus.
Just me and Jesus, right? Yeah. Oh, well, first of all, here's one thought, Ron. Notice that the argument, or the basis for the argument, is that religions are divisive. Well, you can simply turn the tables on the individual who's making that argument and saying, well, do you believe in an absolute truth? And you mentioned that some of these folks are Christian, coming from a Christian community. Well, yes, they're going to believe in an absolute truth, namely Jesus Christ is God. Okay, well, that's a claim of objective truth. But there are others who do not believe that Jesus Christ is God. There are others who do not believe that God exists in the first place. So the very fact that these Christian individuals are making an objective claim, a claim about objective reality, Jesus is God, God exists, by its very nature constitutes a dividing line from those who do not believe that Jesus is God and who do not believe that God exists. So their argument from religion being divisive doesn't hold water, because in as much as they profess objective truths, they're constituting boundaries and dividing lines. That's just the very nature of truth itself. P, not P, right? If you say God exists, well, the contrary to that is God doesn't exist. So the minute you make a statement about objective reality, you're drawing a dividing line, you're drawing a boundary. So that's what I would say in regard to the argument from divisiveness. Now, concerning the me and Jesus thing, Ron, here's the key. Okay, me and Jesus. All right, I look at these historical documents. These early Christian writers are talking about the historical Jesus, right? And we can go through all the historiographical research to say Jesus existed. I can trust the Gospels, all right? We don't have time to do that, but let's say we've done that. We've done our research. This Jesus guy made some claims to be God, okay? I accept that. He rose from the dead, vindicated those claims. Now, we also have to look, Ron, at what Jesus left us. He left us a Christian community. And not just a Christian community where everybody's relative in their Christian thinking of saying, oh, well, I'm going to believe what I think Jesus taught, and you just go ahead and believe what you think Jesus taught. No, Jesus gave us a church, Ron, a Christian community with constituted officials to guide and lead his group of people, his flock. And we see this explicitly in Matthew chapter 16, verses 18 through 19, he constitutes Peter as the visible and central leader of the 12. In Matthew 18, 15 through 17, he talks about when there's a disagreement, you take it to the church, and the church is going to have the final say regarding the matter. We see this played out in Acts chapter 15 at the Council of Jerusalem when there was a theological debate about circumcision. They brought it to the church. They brought it to the church leaders, and the truth was declared. So no such thing as only me and Jesus, but me, Jesus, and his church.
Thank you, Carlo. More Carlo Broussard taking your questions on relativism, what we might call the plague of relativism in the world today. We'll try to clean up our corner of that plague anyways, the part of the world that we can reach. Catholic Answers Live, 888-318-7884 is the number. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Bishop Jeffrey Monforton, Bishop of the Diocese of Steubenville. Make sure you keep it on Catholic Answers Live. God bless you.
It was 100 years ago that our Blessed Mother appeared to 3 children in Fatima, Portugal, and Catholic Answers magazine is marking the anniversary with a very special issue. Want to be sure to get your copy? Subscribe right now to the best Catholic apologetics magazine anywhere by calling 888-291-8000 or by going to Catholic.com. Getting Fatima right, exploding the myths of Fatima, and a closer look at our Blessed Mother. Just a few of the articles to look forward to. You don't want to miss this very special issue highlighting this hallmark event in Catholic history. Don't wait another moment to subscribe. Call 888-291-8000 or go to the shop at Catholic.com right now to get subscriptions for yourself and those you love. Share the faith. Defend the faith. Catholic Answers magazine from Catholic Answers, the most trusted name in Catholic apologetics.
Where can you find the answers to hundreds of the most common questions about the Catholic faith? Catholic Answers 20 Answers series, that's where. Clear, concise, and easy to carry, the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers Press offers hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. They're available individually at special bulk prices, or you can get a starter pack of all 20 at a very special price. And remember, you can now purchase them as ebooks for reading on your mobile devices. Call 1-888-291-8000 or visit the shop at Catholic.com today to get your copies of all the titles in this exciting new series, or ask for them at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're taking on relativism this hour. Is there truth? Is there moral truth? Is there none? Is there no such thing as truth? Are we in a world without truth, without morals? 888-318-7884 is the number. I'll just remind you that everyone who gets on the air with Carlo today is going to get a free copy of Carlo's new audio a CD. I guess that's the only kind of CDs there are. Well, maybe that, I don't know. Your Truth, My Truth, How to Understand and Refute Relativistic Thinking. Carlo, before we continue, I do want to ask you about one thing. Be bold. Be Catholic. Calling all men. Don't miss this year's Catholic Men's Conference on March 25th at St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Church. That's in Iowa, and I see your picture on this flyer.
That's right. You see my picture and you see my name, and thanks be to God, I'm so honored and blessed that I'm going to be able to be speaking with John Leonetti, Father Rick Wendell, Dr. Matt Holbach, and others at this awesome men's conference. I tell you what, Cy, I just love going to men's conferences. I love attending them. I love speaking at them in order to experience that brotherhood, that fellowship, that energy where the Holy Spirit is present, forming men to become the saints that we're called to be. It's going to be a great experience, and I can't wait to get there. It's going to be so much fun.
Well, it's this Saturday.
That's right.
So if you're in Iowa or near Iowa and you can get there, Saturday, March 25th, it's registration starts at 7, masses at 8:30, and you can find out all about it by going to Iowa Catholic Men's Conference.com.
Yeah, my talk's going to be forming men to become defenders of faith. So I'm basically going to issue the challenge to the men present to engage the battle on the intellectual front, and the importance of being protectors and guardians and defenders of the mind, because the mind is the gateway to the heart.
Wow, fantastic. And you know what? Our next caller is from Davenport, Iowa. I don't know, Anonymous, if you will be there with Carlo, but you are on with Carlo. Anonymous from Davenport, Iowa.
Good afternoon. My brother-in-law will be there.
Oh, cool. I could tell as soon as I heard your voice that you're not going to be there.
No, but we'll have the representation.
Beautiful.
I would like to ask you a question. Yesterday I was having a great, interesting car conversation with my 11-year-old son. I just mentioned that I had to throw away a humorous magazine I had purchased because it turned out there was a bunch of inappropriate material in it. And he said, well, other families don't, they use those words. They speak that way. Just because we are Catholic and we do that, that's all families are different. And I helped kind of create this relativism, I think, by, as he was growing up, trying not to, pass judgment on things. And so now I'm wondering if this is actually turning around to, be bad religion, so to speak. Could I have your advice?
Yeah, well, first of all, just Anonymous, just as the church does, and just as Jesus teaches us in the Gospels, there's nothing wrong with making a judgment about a particular action, that a particular behavior is inappropriate human behavior. I mean, you do it every day with your 11-year-old son, right? If your 11-year-old son mouths off to you, mama, you're going to have some consequences, right? Okay? So the fact that we make judgments about a behavior and say, hey, that's inappropriate human behavior, there's nothing wrong with that. We have to do that as human beings in order to, as we were mentioning earlier, function as human beings in society. So if you can communicate to your son that there's a difference between a certain behavior being inappropriate, wrong, immoral, whatever word you want to use, and one's responsibility for that immoral behavior. And this is where upbringing comes in, right? So let's say, for example, your 11-year-old son heard his friend at school say a bad 4-letter word, right? Okay? Now, you can say, okay, son, well, that word, it has a certain meaning to it. That's really bad. It's not good for us as human beings. It contradicts our human dignity and our value created in the image and likeness of God. Now, so that's bad, and we judge that. We ought not to say that word, given the conventions of our society and the meaning that's attached to it. But whether your friend is responsible for that or not, only God can judge that, because it may very well be that your friend's son was brought up in a home where his parents simply didn't teach him that these words are so bad and violating of our human dignity and keeping us from loving God and loving each other. So notice, Anonymous, there's a distinction to be made between judging a particular action to be wrong and then judging one's responsibility or culpability, as we would say in theology, like whether that person has full knowledge of what they're doing and whether or not it's wrong. Does that help, at least for starters?
It does indeed. Thank you very much.
Okay, fantastic.
Well, don't forget to give your address to the call screener, because you're going to be getting a free copy of Carlo's CD, Your Truth, My Truth.
And Cy, if I may just follow up very quickly, very briefly, in the Gospels, when Jesus talks about do not judge, he's not talking about not judging a particular action to be immoral. Jesus did that left and right throughout his whole ministry. He said to the woman caught in adultery, go and sin no more. That implies that what she was doing was wrong. But the judgment that Jesus says for us not to enact, do not judge, has to do with one's responsibility, one's culpability, judging one's knowledge or one's consent. Only God has access to that subjective dimension, right? Only God has access to the inner workings of the heart and the soul and in the mind. But we can judge external behaviors and say that's not good for human beings, that is good for human beings, we ought to pursue the good, avoid the evil, etc.
Thank you very much, Anonymous. We go now to Matt in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on KVSS. I think that's our second call today from Omaha, Nebraska. You're very big in Omaha, Carlo. Matt, what's on your mind?
That's a great place.
Thanks, guys. My question is regarding seems like there's kind of a conflict between relativism today and today's scientific. Everybody has to have scientific proof for everything.
Yeah.
So how does that kind of play out?
Right, Matt. And I would agree with you, Matt, that it's interesting in pop culture and modern society, relativism is very prevalent. But yet you still have this push for an intellectual elitism, right? Which is reserved for, unfortunately, the scientific community by many non-Christians or atheists who would say, if you are, to belong to the intellectually elite, you have to embrace science only and reject God. And what's interesting is that you do see this tension, Matt, between relativism and this sort of desire for objective truth within the scientific community. And that's something I think is legitimate to point out. However, Matt, it's important to note that very often, when it comes to relativism that would be embraced among those in the scientific community who are looking for objective truth, often it's moral relativism that they embrace, as opposed to the intellectual relativism. So rather than saying there's no truth in general, they're going to reject that because they're seeking truth about the cosmos, right? They're seeking truth about the universe, objective truth. But they often, of course, not all scientists, I'm talking about those scientists who would embrace a moral relativism. They would often say, well, truth is relative when it comes to morality, right? When it comes to how you're going to use your sexual powers, right? When it comes to how you're going to identify as a male or a female, or even in some cases as a cat or a human, or an alien or a human, or 6 years old or 52 years old, as a case in Canada. So I think it's important to make that distinction that those within the scientific community who are seeking objective truth, at least atheists, you could say, not all atheists, but a lot of them out there, would be a relativist when it comes to moral truth, not necessarily truth in general. And that's why, Matt, I made the distinction at the outset of the show between intellectual relativism and moral relativism, because all intellectual relativists are going to be moral relativists, at least in their mental framework. But not all moral relativists are intellectual relativists. So there's a distinction to be made. Is that helpful?
Yes, that is very.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate that call. Michael in San Antonio, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. You are on with Carlo Broussard.
How you doing, Carlo? Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome, Michael.
The question I have is I was in a debate, I guess, with a family member, and they're like, "Oh, how dare you Christians say that you guys have the right way, and there's only one, or that other religions are wrong."
Right.
So I decided to use the principle of non-contradiction. I was like, I said, Jews don't believe Jesus is God. Christians believe Jesus is God. I said, Jesus cannot be God and not God at the same time.
There you go.
And so he was just like, I was like, is that possible? He's like, yeah. And I was like, okay.
Right.
I'm like, I'm at a loss now because you just you're ignoring logic. He's
Correct.
kind of influenced by Eastern religions that say there's a duality and a singularity at the same time. So
okay. All right.
I don't know what approach to take.
Yeah. Well, fundamentally, Michael, there are times, my friend, when you come to an impasse in a discussion where there's no more you can do. If one is willing to doubt the fundamental principle of reason, of the principle of non-contradiction, well, they're undermining their very reasoning capacities itself. Now, if you want to take a shot at it, Michael, you can show the logical absurdity itself of denying the principle of non-contradiction. It gets a little bit heady. It might be a little difficult to grasp on the spot, but you can give it a shot. And this is something that I deal with in my study guide for my talk, Your Truth, My Truth, which you're going to get a free copy of. In one of the last chapters, I teach you how to show the absurdity of denying the principle, because here's the key, Michael. In the very denial of the principle, you have to you presuppose the principle. So for example, let's say I want to say the principle of non-contradiction is false, that something could be and not be in the same respect, the same place and time. Well, if I make that assertion, Michael, I have to intend to express the meaning of the statement and not the opposite. What is the opposite? The principle's true. But I don't want to affirm that, because I'd be undermining my initial denial, right? So if I must intend to express the meaning of my argument, of my statement, the principle's false, and not the opposite, well, notice I presuppose the truth of the principle, that something cannot be and not be in the same respect, the same place and time. So the point being is that in order to deny the principle of non-contradiction, Michael, you have to assume it. You have to assume its truth. So fundamentally, it's incoherent. This is why we call it a self-evident principle of reason. You can't demonstrate its truth because there's no prior knowledge that you can rely on in order to come to the conclusion that it's true. All you can do is defend it by showing the incoherence of its denial. And I teach you that in the study guide, Michael, that you're going to get if you leave your address and phone number to our call screener.
Thank you very much, Michael. I hope that was helpful. We got to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more Karlo Broussard answering your questions on relativism right here on Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Bishop James Wall from the Diocese of Gallup, New Mexico. Keep it right here on Catholic Answers Live.
Howdy folks, this is Jimmy Akin, and I have exciting news. Starting this spring, Catholic Answers will begin airing its first ever television program. It'll be appearing on EWTN, and you'll also be able to watch it, no matter where you are, from Catholic.com using your smart TV, tablet, or other device. Catholic Answers' mission is to use every means we can to reach people with the message of Christ and His Church. But until now, television has been beyond our reach. That's about to change, and that's why we need your help right now. Producing a quality, professional television show like this is not cheap, and it can only happen with the generous support of donors like you. To make your donation, visit Catholic.com and click the Catholic Answers television banner, or call us toll-free at 888-291-8000. That's the Catholic Answers television banner at Catholic.com, or call toll-free 888-291-8000.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
It was 100 years ago that our Blessed Mother appeared to 3 children in Fatima, Portugal, and Catholic Answers magazine is marking the anniversary with a very special issue. Want to be sure to get your copy? Subscribe right now to the best Catholic apologetics magazine anywhere by calling 888-291-8000 or by going to Catholic.com. Getting Fatima right, exploding the myths of Fatima, and a closer look at our Blessed Mother. Just a few of the articles to look forward to. You don't want to miss this very special issue highlighting this hallmark event in Catholic history. Don't wait another moment to subscribe. Call 888-291-8000 or go to the shop at Catholic.com right now to get subscriptions for yourself and those you love. Share the faith. Defend the faith. Catholic Answers magazine from Catholic Answers, the most trusted name in Catholic apologetics.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Karlo Broussard, staff apologist at Catholic Answers, is our guest this hour. His CD, Your Truth, My Truth, How to Understand and Refute Relativistic Thinking. And that's what we're talking about, relativism, this hour on Catholic Answers Live. We go to Bernadine in Las Vegas, Nevada, listening on Immaculate Heart Radio. Bernadine, what's your question for Karlo? Bernadine, I'm sorry, Bernadine, I didn't put you on the air. I messed up.
Oh.
So start over again, Bernadine. That was my fault.
No problem. Hi, guys.
Hi.
My question is, When did this all come about? I mean, was it in the time of Socrates? When did this all start?
Yeah, well, actually, you find elements of the idea of relativism in the pre-Socratic philosophers, such as Heraclitus, who is a pre-Socratic philosopher, died around 475 BC. And he taught that basically because cultures differ in their beliefs and their opinions, that there is no absolute truth because of all of these different beliefs, which is a common argument that's put forth by relativists even today. And even Protagoras, another pre-Socratic philosopher who died about 412 BC, he taught that man is the measure of all things, right? And that the measure of reality and what is real is an individual's opinion. So we see relativism dating all the way back to the pre-Socratic philosophers, and basically the ancient philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle are responding to these pre-Socratic philosophers in order to show the objectivity of reality, that there is objective truth. Plato would talk about the forms, which he taught exist in a third realm, these universals that are objectively true, and everything else is measured against those forms. Aristotle would teach a different view of the forms. Forms do exist, but Aristotle would teach that the forms exist in the things themselves, as well as in the intellect once we abstract the form, as we come to know things. He denied Plato's idea of the forms existing in a third realm. Now, Thomas Aquinas, in the medieval times, in the Middle Ages, the 13th century, Thomas Aquinas would follow suit from Aristotle and teach that forms do exist in the things themselves and in the mind as we abstract the form, as we come to know it. When I talk about form, I'm talking about like dogness, right? I see Fido, hey, that's a dog. Dogness, the essence of a dog, exists in that dog Fido, but it also exists in my mind so that I can go and look at Cujo or Feed Jake, right? You remember the country song, Feed Jake? Anyway.
No, you're way out in the weeds now.
That's
Carla.
right, I know, man. But in order to apply that form to another dog. Now, Thomas Aquinas would say that these forms ultimately exist in God's divine intellect, the archetypes, right, by which everything is measured. Now, in modern times, Bernardine, we see it arising in Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, and let me see if I can get this right, 18th century? 18th century German philosopher, I'm going to have to check on that. And what he taught was what he called, Bernardine, these categories of understanding. Now, bottom line is, Bernardine, he taught rather than the mind conforming to reality, reality actually conforms to the mind. We actually structure our sensuous perceptions, things that we perceive through our senses, and we actually construct the real. Now, he wasn't a relativist, but in the sense that we determine reality because he believed these categories of understanding, this power of the mind to take what we experience and make it into what is real, belong to all human beings. But fundamentally, what he taught was the essence of relativism. The mind doesn't conform to reality, but reality conforms to the mind. And that's what we find in modernity, in modern-day relativism, that we have to ultimately critique and say it's self-defeating and show the logical absurdities and how it ultimately leads to the undermining of society and civilization itself.
Does that help you, Bernardine?
Tremendously. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bernardine.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Now, Carlo, if I could just push you. I've always thought of Pontius Pilate as the ultimate relativist because of his question, what is truth? And go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you could follow that line of thought. What is truth? I'm sure he asked that question in sort of a snarky way, you know? And ultimately, that's the question that is asked today. If it's asked in a snarky way, what is truth, implying that there really is no truth, or if there is a truth, we can't come to know it, which would be different than relativism, it would be an intellectual skepticism, right? And then we can critique that. But, Sai, it's important to point out that even as absolutists, we want to ask the question, what is truth? Because that's the fundamental drive as a human being. As Aristotle said, every man desires to know. And with that desire to know comes the question, what is truth? What is real? And that's the impetus to set out upon the journey to find out what is true.
Carlo Broussard, our guest this hour. TC in Portland, Oregon, listening on Immaculate Heart Radio. You are on with Carlo. What's your question?
Hi, thank you. Hopefully I can say this concisely. When I bring up abortion with people who are for abortion as a choice, usually what they'll say is that, I wouldn't make that choice, but that's for somebody else to make.
Right.
And, but at the same time, it's not quite a true relativist, because they'd also say you can't kill someone because that's against the law.
Okay.
Who's like your child or something. So how do you deal with people whose beliefs are partially relativist,
right,
partially going by the law, or it's not like you can't completely dispute it by saying you're a relativist because they pick and choose?
Right. Well, in these TC, right? Did I get that correct?
TC, yes.
Okay. Well, what you have to do is you have to take these issues one by one. So if they're just a relativist in one particular issue, for example, you brought up the case of abortion, well, then you could use the tactic of trying to find their logic, right? Find the logic that's embedded in their argument and then extract it and apply it to other situations where they would see it would be absurd. So in the case of they believe it's the woman's choice to terminate the pregnancy, to have an abortion. Well, then you have to probe and begin asking the questions, well, okay, what are they choosing? Yes, they're choosing. And right off the bat, a half-truth there is we agree that it's a good thing to choose, to have human freedom. This is a great gift, namely free will, that God has created us with. However, the other half of the argument that's not true is notice that the individual, the woman, is choosing something that's not good. So the whole argument assumes that what the woman is choosing is a good. And that, TC, is that's where the debate lies. That's what we have to press on. That's what we have to challenge. Is this choice, what the woman is choosing, we'd say in moral philosophy, the object, right, that the woman is choosing, the object of the act, is that a good? What is she choosing? She's choosing to kill an innocent human being. Is that a good thing that we ought to choose? The answer is no. Therefore, that woman ought not to choose that bad thing, right? That thing that's not good, not only for the human being whose life she's bringing to an end, but also for her, because she's making an act that violates the dignity of human beings, which is going to harm her herself. We can talk about the psychological and emotional problems that result, but ultimately harming one's character because you're taking the life of an innocent human being. So in conclusion, TC, I would say that you have to take it issue by issue and try to identify what's good about it, we want to choose, but then what's bad about it, namely what the individual is choosing. And if it's not good, well, then it's not good for all human beings, right? So I don't want to choose to take the life of an innocent human being because taking the life of an innocent human being is not good. That's bad. That's immoral, which is also going to apply to every other human being as well. Why? Because we're all human, you see? Is that helpful for you?
Yeah. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, TC, thank you.
Thank you, TC. Appreciate that. Carlo, I want to just remind folks that you're going to be in Iowa this weekend at the men's conference, Saturday, yes. March 25th. You'll be at the conference. And I also would like to remind people that you can, even if you didn't get on the air with Carlo today, get his CD, Your Truth, My Truth, How to Understand and Refute Relativistic Thinking, along with a 38-page study guide. You just go to shop.catholic.com, and it's less than $10 there.
Amen.
I like the less than $10. I don't know.
That's
how
a good
much,
deal. I don't know how we survive here with such cheap prices on our products.
I know. It's less than a sandwich. Everything is based on sandwiches in my financial calculations. Well, how many sandwiches would that be?
Sorry, that implies you eat a lot of sandwiches.
Look at me, Carlo. Just take a look. Thank you so much, Carlo Broussard. Next hour coming up, can you share your faith with charity, calm, and joy? Brandon Vaught from Bishop Robert Barron's Word on Fire Catholic Ministries will be here to help you do just that. So get on the line if you got a question for Brandon, 888-318-7884. See you right after this.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Do you feel confident in your faith? Are you confident enough to share it with other people? Our guest this hour wants to help you gain the confidence to share your faith calmly and joyfully, which I think is the way Jesus did it. 888-318-7884 is the number, 888-31-TRUTH, if you would like to speak with our guest about sharing the faith with calm and joy. I'm your host, Cy Kellett, and the guest that we have is the content director for Bishop Robert Barron's Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. Brandon Vaught is also a best-selling Catholic author, blogger, and speaker. He's the founder of StrangeNotions.com, kind of one of the, probably the main place to dialogue between Catholics and atheists. And he has a couple of really exciting projects in the works, which we will get to in just a second. Brandon Vaught, thank you for being with us today on Catholic Answers Live.
Oh, thanks for having me, Cy. It's a great joy.
And so you did a thing, some YouTube stuff on getting confident. Tell me the name of that again.
About a week and a half ago, I started a video series called Confident Catholic, and it was all about how to get Catholics feeling confident about sharing their faith. And then that kind of transitioned into the launch of this bigger series that I'm calling Claritas U, which is an online membership site for Catholics that walks them slowly through a bunch of the hot button issues and helps them get clear and confident about those.
And so that was the plan all along. You would do the confident Catholic ones, and then that would kind of be the way of drawing attention to Claritas U, which is a fantastic project.
Yeah, exactly. I think my strategy was more kind of lay out the general principles in Confident Catholic. So here's why we're not confident. Here are things that you could do to get confident. And then that naturally led into Claritas U, which is we apply these general principles to the specific hot button issues that cause most Catholics to get nervous.
Well, just the name, Claritas, it suggests that the reason in your mind that people are not confident is they're not clear on the faith. Is that right?
Yeah. I believe that clarity breeds confidence. So if you want to be confident, you got to get clear. The most confident Catholics in the world, and we see this on shows like this one, Catholic Answers Live, are not necessarily the people who know the most facts, who have the greatest memory, or who are the most eloquent. The most confident Catholics are those who are clear about what they believe. They're clear about the objections to those beliefs because they've heard them a million times, and they're clear how to respond to those objections. So it really comes down to clarity. If you can get clear about what you believe and how to respond to the objections, then you'll be confident.
And so there is a kind of pressure now on people, wouldn't you say? There's a kind of like, we don't live in a society where it's like, oh, you're this, I'm that, but there's a kind of justify for me why you believe that Christian stuff, why you believe that Catholic stuff.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. I think in past decades, the culture was mostly ambivalent toward Christianity. Like you said, it was kind of live and let live. You believe what you believe, I believe what I believe. But I think especially in the past decade, and more specifically since 9/11, the culture has become increasingly antagonistic toward faith. And we see this all the time. There are countless examples of ways that faith is being squeezed out of the public conversation. And more specifically, when I talk to individual Catholics, I hear all the time, they tell me they feel pressured, they feel nervous, they feel like they don't want to admit that they're a Catholic or a Christian because they're afraid of the repercussions.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole purpose of this Claritas U program, was to help you stop feeling nervous, to get you feeling confident, and so you don't have to be afraid anymore.
Well, if you're nothing if not clear and succinct yourself, Brandon, and you're writing and whatnot. But so now you've got it broken down into 3 things to get clear about.
Yeah, that's right. Again, I think if you want to get clear about your faith, it really boils down to these 3 things. First, getting clear about what you believe. That's the foundation. If you don't know what you believe and you can't express it clearly, then you're going to be nervous. You're going to be tongue-tied. You're going to feel awkward. So that's number 1. Second, you need to get clear about the best objections to those beliefs. And that's why, again, shows like this one where people call in with real objections are so valuable, because you can see the best arguments people have against Catholicism. And once you've heard those, once you're familiar with them, they won't scare you. You can go into any situation and know, well, I've heard the best arguments against Catholicism and I know how to answer them. So that's the second thing to get clear about, is the best objections. And then third and finally, the last thing you need to get clear about are the best responses to those objections. You want to be prepared not only for the objections, but how to answer them charitably and succinctly and persuasively. So those are the three ways to get clear. You need to get clear about what you believe, clear about the objections, and clear how to answer them.
And that's what Brandon intends to do for you today too. If you have questions about how to share your faith with clarity, calm, and joy, and he's got all kinds of helpful ideas for you. Happy to take your calls. 888-318-7884. Also, welcome to everybody watching on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Periscope, and you have two options there. You can give us a call. We'd love to take your call at 888-318-7884, or you can just type in your question there for Brandon, and if we can get to it, we will get to it. Brandon, how do you feel about just going right to calls?
I'd love it. Let's do it.
All right, Eddie in Erie, Pennsylvania, listening on the Stations of the Cross. You are on with Brandon Vaught. What's your question?
Hi, Brandon. I just wondered, I went to a Catholic university, and as far as, I had nothing against the Catholic, Well, I didn't know anything about it, but I had nothing against it, But mostly when I got there was like they would just tell me you're a Catholic, and then that would be it, So I really got not much more than that. So I would hope that if you are to say that you're Catholic and that you think that this is the truth and the way, that you would give a reason more to it, give them some something so that they would be interested,
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Eddie. I think for many Catholics, if you ask them, why are you Catholic? You'd probably get some version of an answer like, well, that's the way I was raised, or that's just what I believe, or that's what my family believes, something like that. Now, those all may be true, and they're not bad reasons to accept Catholicism personally, but the problem is they're not objective, and so they're not persuasive to other people. What we need are objective reasons to defend our faith, to explain why it's true, not just for us, but for everybody. And so that's when we need to turn to, say, the great truths in the creed. Well, I'm Catholic because I believe God exists. I believe Jesus is God. I believe he rose from the dead. I believe he established the church, and so on and so forth. So it's important that we have good objective reasons to explain why we believe what we believe, specifically why we're Catholic.
Does that help you, Eddie?
Yes, sure does. Yes, very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the call, Eddie. Brandon, I think we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back with more calls on how to share your faith with clarity, calm, and joy. Brandon Vaught is our guest this hour, content director for Bishop Robert Barron's Word on Fire Catholic Ministries and doer of many other things. And now, Claritas U. Listen, before we go to break, Brandon, real quick, the website, how do I find Claritas U?
Great question. The website's Claritas U, the letter U, claritasu.com, and the enrollment window closes tomorrow. So we're only open for a limited time to new members, so you want to check it out today or tomorrow at the latest.
Okay, very good. We'll be right back with more Brandon Vaught on Catholic Answers Live.
Your number one source for Catholic apologetics and evangelization, Catholic Answers Live.
We hear it every year, the perennial question. What are you giving up for Lent? And there's nothing wrong with doing without certain things you may have an affinity for. But this year, why not turn the question around and ask, what are you taking on for Lent? Did you know that by investing as little as 5 minutes a day, you can take on a Lenten practice that will both build up and inform your faith? A Daily Defense is the perfect book for your Lenten journey. Jimmy Akin takes up a different challenge for every day of the year, teaching you how you can defend the faith and give answers to Catholics and skeptics alike. And it's user-friendly, so finding the answers can be quick and easy. Make this Lent one to remember. Order your copy of A Daily Defense today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
It was 100 years ago that our Blessed Mother appeared to 3 children in Fatima, Portugal, and Catholic Answers magazine is marking the anniversary with a very special issue. Want to be sure to get your copy? Subscribe right now to the best Catholic apologetics magazine anywhere by calling 888-291-8000 or by going to Catholic.com. Getting Fatima right, exploding the myths of Fatima, and a closer look at our Blessed Mother. Just a few of the articles to look forward to. You don't want to miss this very special issue highlighting this hallmark event in Catholic history. Don't wait another moment to subscribe. Call 888-291-8000 or go to the shop at Catholic.com right now to get subscriptions for yourself and those you love. Share the faith. Defend the faith. Catholic Answers magazine from Catholic Answers, the most trusted name in Catholic apologetics.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Brandon Vaught is our guest from Bishop Robert Barron's Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. Sharing your faith with clarity, calm, and joy is the topic. And ClaritasU.com is where you can find him. And you do all that by yourself, Claritas U.
Not quite by myself. I have an assistant, Margot Basso, who is an uber Catholic Answers Live fan. So I promised I'd give her a shout out on the air. She loves you guys, and she's been so great for me.
I am so glad to hear that. Well, that's because we know Margot very well. That's cool.
Right.
All right. So we'll go to calls again. We have an anonymous caller in Boston, Massachusetts, listening on Stations of the Cross. Anonymous, you are on with Brandon Vaught. No? Anonymous? I kind of heard anonymous.
Hello?
Oh, hi. There you go. You're on with Brandon Vaught.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I heard the 3 points that Brandon enumerated, and it just struck me that he doesn't address a kind of a fundamental point as to why so many Catholics feel nervous about sharing their faith. I mean, of course, it's vitally important to know your faith and to be clear in your own beliefs, but I think, if I'm honest, I have to say that social pressure, fear of social conflict, is a powerful reason why I'm sometimes reticent about speaking up in social situations where, viewpoints contrary to the faith are being enunciated. And, I think it's a very prevalent fear that Catholics have living in a society which is increasingly hostile to the Catholic faith. So I'm wondering how, what strategies or what Brandon would say in response to Catholics who have trouble speaking up because of this fear of social ostracism or being pilloried, in front of a group, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not an uncommon one. Most of the Catholics I talk to would say something almost identical, that they're afraid of discussing their faith, not only because they don't know what to say, but they're worried about the reactions. They don't want to disrupt or ruin a relationship. They're worried about especially situations in the work environment or the student environment, any repercussions that would result. So let me say a couple things about that. First, I'm with you that I'm not suggesting we need to speak up in every situation, that anytime a moral religious topic comes up, we necessarily need to make the Catholic view known. There is an element of prudence that takes the context into consideration and judges whether it's an appropriate time to bring up the faith or whether it'll result in real fruit or whether it'll do more damage than good. So in every situation, there's a prudential discussion that needs to be had. But the second point is that that's an independent question of whether you know what to say in the situations where it would be prudent to speak up. I found that for many Catholics, it's true that some situations would be imprudent, but in the situations that would be prudent to speak up, they still are nervous and afraid because they don't quite know what to say. They're worried they'll say the wrong thing in the wrong way at the wrong time, and they'll hurt somebody's feelings, they'll rupture a relationship, or any of that. So I would first add those 2 points, that one, it is a question of prudence, but two, there will be times when it's prudent to speak up, and in those times you need clarity. But then finally, I'd say that there are simple tactics, and you see many of them exhibited here on this show whenever Catholic Answers opens the lines to non-Catholics, particularly atheists and Protestants. There are ways to have civil, charitable discussions about hot-button issues without ruining a relationship or without backlash or social repercussions. And I think the best way to do that is not to preach, not to shove your view down someone's throats, but to ask lots and lots of questions. So, for example, if you're at work or if you're in the classroom or you're at, among friends and you're worried about any backlash that would come up, instead of just stating the Catholic view or trying to force it down other people's throats, instead ask questions about the opposing view. So if somebody implies, say, that God doesn't exist, or someone suggests that the church is wrong about same-sex marriage, you might instead lead with questions asking, well, why do you believe that's true? Or what reasons do you have to think the church is wrong on same-sex marriage? Or what evidence do you have that would suggest that God doesn't exist? When you ask questions, you don't usually face the sort of backlash that you get when you make statements. So those would be the three things I'd say is, number one, it is a question of prudence. Number two, there are situations where prudence requires you to speak up, so you need to be clear. And then number three, in those situations, ask more questions than make statements.
Does that help you, Anonymous?
Okay. Yeah, I think that is good. Yeah, I was just looking for some general guidelines as to, where to draw the line in terms of those prudential decisions. So, yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Anonymous. Brandon, are you saying that if I know my faith really well, I do have that sense of clarity and calm about what I believe, maybe I'll make the judgment that I can share my faith a little bit more than I would otherwise, or maybe a lot more?
I think with clarity and confidence comes freedom, because you're then free to say, well, I can speak up or I cannot. But if you're not clear about your faith, then you basically never speak up. You're enslaved to being silent. And so we need to get clear so that we do have the flexibility to, when the situation calls for it, speak up.
Brandon Vaught is our guest. 888-318-7884 is our number. Sharing your faith with clarity, calm, and joy is our topic today. We go now to Matthew in Wilmington, Ohio, listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Matthew, you are on with Brandon Vaught. What's your question?
Hi, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing great, Matthew. Good to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I am a college student at Wilmington College, which is a Quaker college, and I was just wondering, because sometimes I'll get the bravery to speak up in class and state something that's from the Catholic perspective, and honestly, sometimes after I get done speaking, I feel like I can hear their thoughts of my fellow students, just like, oh, I can't believe you said that. What a jerk! I mean, and I guess I'm just wondering, what are some good ways to interact with college students specifically, especially like my peers, that would be a good way to just spread Catholicism?
Yeah, great question, Matthew. I would give a lot of the same advice I gave to the last caller. I would say, number one, you need to discern when it's prudent to speak up and not. I will say, I've talked to a lot of kids in high school and college classes who have horror stories about when they've spoken up in the middle of class, usually when they're objecting to something the teacher said. And so I'll say, hearing from these stories, it's usually not the best idea to confront a teacher in class and object to their views in front of all the other kids. That usually doesn't turn out well. But that doesn't mean that silence is the only option. There are several other ways to maneuver that situation. So one would be gently challenging the professor's views by asking questions. It's the same approach I just mentioned. Use Socratic dialogue, model the approach that you hear on shows like Catholic Answers Live, and delicately push back against the teacher's assumptions with questions. Other than that, you can also, I think, engage far more fruitfully in one-on-one discussions with the other students out of class. Classrooms tend to be a pretty tense and often hostile atmosphere. But out of class, maybe after class, in the study halls, on Facebook, privately, that's a much better time to maybe engage or push back a little bit on whatever views are held in class. So those would be two things I'd recommend.
Oh, well, thanks so much.
Thank you, Matthew. Michelle in Boston, Massachusetts. Oh, another caller from Stations of the Cross there in Boston, Massachusetts. You are on with Brandon Vaught. What's your question?
Well, I was thinking more of, sometimes in a situation where somebody says something negative about the Catholic faith, and, I'm sort of stymied, like you say, it's like you hesitate to speak up because you're afraid to say the wrong thing or whatever. How do I, as a Catholic, approach that?
Yeah, I'd say a few things. One tactic that I've learned from my friends at a United Kingdom group called Catholic Voices is anytime someone criticizes the church, there's always a good seed behind that criticism, always what they call a positive intention. So, for example, if they criticize the Catholic Church's handling of the sexual abuse cases, a couple decades ago, usually that means they care deeply about children, about protecting children, about the life and dignity of every human person. And so instead of responding immediately by saying, oh, that was in the past, things have gotten a lot better, it's not that big of a deal now, instead of that, you could begin by saying something like, hey, I agree with you. That was an awful thing. I'm just as upset and scandalized by it as you are. Children should never be abused or taken advantage of, and people that do should be punished as severely as the law allows. And so by doing that, you find something in their criticism to agree with. You start on common ground. That tends to diffuse a lot of the tension and make it less of a mano battle of words. And so that's a good approach I like to recommend, is whenever somebody criticizes something that you deeply believe, try and find the positive intention behind it. Try to find the shared value that you can begin with. And then after you find common ground, you can move into a more thorough response.
Oh, that's good. No, because the reason why I say that too is sometimes my son is baptized Catholic, but I don't know what he has a faith, but I'm not sure what that is. And sometimes he will ask me a question, and he'll say, explain your faith, and that's when I say, well, I'm at a loss for words. So try to find the positive intention behind that.
Yeah, or I'd say too, Michelle, maybe turn the tables around and ask him what he believes. What do you believe about God or about the church or about prayer? These things. Because what I've found often is that many people who have left the church have very muddled and confused views of God and of Catholicism. And you can expose that by asking simple questions. What do you believe? Why do you believe that? Where'd you get that belief from? So ask him those questions. Put him on the spot a little bit more rather than you feeling all the pressure.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Brandon, do you have role models? You're giving the principles, but I wonder if you have a role model or two or three that you can say, like that person did it.
Yeah, you guys did not pay me to say this, but I'll say all the apologists at Catholic Answers model these principles wonderfully. I think of Trent Horn, Carlo Broussard, who was just on the channel, Tim Staples, Jimmy Akin. If you listen to any of the hours of this show, you'll see a masterclass of these principles on display. And then finally, I'd add my own boss, again, maybe because it's obligatory, but more likely because I so admire him. But Bishop Barron, I think, is another model at this. He's able to engage people who deeply disagree with the church, including many who have been wounded deeply by the church, and gently, charitably, but effectively turn the discussion in a positive direction and help lead them a little closer to God.
Well, now, does Bishop Barron, you don't have to share anything out of school or anything, but does he ever get criticism, for, oh, you're being too easy on that person, or you needed to give because I do think some of our apologists get that sometimes, probably, and so the person who maybe masters these techniques can also be vulnerable to criticism from within the church itself.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's true for any Catholic who's open and public with their faith. And I think, though, that it shouldn't stop us. I think people like Bishop Barron, Catholic apologists on Catholic Answers, we're all criticized for various reasons. But to me, that's never been a reason to slow down or to stop. Look at all the great evangelists and catechists in Scripture. Think of people like Peter, Paul, James, John, all the rest of the writers in the New Testament who were relentlessly criticized by the communities they served. But to me, that's it's sort of a secondary consideration. These are all in-house criticisms that are worth dealing with. But let's collectively agree that the best use of the church's energies is focused toward the missions of evangelization and catechesis. So let's move forward together. Are we going to make mistakes? Sure, but let's keep moving forward.
Brandon, we're coming up right against the break. I just want to ask you a question real quick. How important is it to you in your mind that we're, as well as being clear on the faith, we're trying to live the faith day to day, like that we're kind to the poor, or that we're, all the things, those kinds of things?
Crucially important. The best argument for Catholicism is a saint, so it's going to work better than arguments.
Yeah, very good. Brandon Vaught, sharing your faith with clarity, calm, and joy is our topic this hour. Brandon's happy to take your calls on how to do just that. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-31-TRUTH. This is Catholic Answers Live, and we'll be right back.
This is Pat Buchanan. You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
It was 100 years ago that our Blessed Mother appeared to 3 children in Fatima, Portugal, and Catholic Answers magazine is marking the anniversary with a very special issue. Want to be sure to get your copy? Subscribe right now to the best Catholic apologetics magazine anywhere by calling 888-291-8000 or by going to Catholic.com. Getting Fatima right, exploding the myths of Fatima, and a closer look at our Blessed Mother. Just a few of the articles to look forward to. You don't want to miss this very special issue highlighting this hallmark event in Catholic history. Don't wait another moment to subscribe. Call 888-291-8000 or go to the shop at Catholic.com right now to get subscriptions for yourself and those you love. Share the faith. Defend the faith. Catholic Answers magazine from Catholic Answers, the most trusted name in Catholic apologetics.
Where can you find the answers to hundreds of the most common questions about the Catholic faith? Catholic Answers 20 Answer series, that's where. Clear, concise, and easy to carry, the 20 Answer series from Catholic Answers Press offers hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. They're available individually at special bulk prices, or you can get a starter pack of all 20 at a very special price. And remember, you can now purchase them as ebooks for reading on your mobile devices. Call 1-888-291-8000 or visit the shop at Catholic.com today to get your copies of all the titles in this exciting new series, or ask for them at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Coming up tomorrow on EWTN Radio, Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo. Teresa talks with Eric Sammons about the old evangelization, how to spread the faith like Jesus did, and then Andrew Walther about the Knights of Columbus efforts to aid genocide victims. Teresa Tomeo airs weekday mornings at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific. And right after Catholic Answers Live, keep it here for EWTN Live. Monsignor John Armitage discusses deep devotion to and love for Our Lady, right here on EWTN Radio. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Brandon Vaught is our guest this hour. Brandon Vaught, the founder now of Claritas U. And you should check it out today because it's enrollment. Is that the right word, enrollment, Brandon?
That's right.
It closes tomorrow. So
That's right.
Go over to Claritas, Claritas, and the letter U, all one word, .com, and you can learn more about that effort there. We're talking today about sharing your faith with clarity, calm, and joy. 888-318-7884 is the number. And Brandon, we have a volunteer from Immaculate Heart Radio here with us in the studio. That's Martin, and he has a question for you.
Great.
Yeah, hi, Brandon.
Hey, Martin.
I appreciate all you're doing. I'm real interested in a little bit about your bio and your faith journey and what brought you to this place that you're doing what you're doing.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to share that. So I was born and raised a Protestant. I was a Presbyterian for the first roughly 20 years of my life. And to make a long story short, in my senior year of college, I was studying mechanical engineering and minoring in physics and math. So I was real inquisitive and analytical. And I began exploring different traditions and ended up stumbling on Catholicism. And after a year of exploring, I decided to become Catholic like 2 weeks before I graduated college. So that was about 8 years ago. And then after that, I'd been writing a fairly popular blog as a Protestant. And then when I became Catholic, that blog sort of morphed into a semi-Catholic apologetics type blog. That started gaining traction, and that eventually led to my first book, which was called The Church and New Media. And that led to some more books, some other speaking and writing. And then 3 years ago, I was invited by Bishop Robert Barron, then Father Robert Barron, to come work for his wonderful Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. So that's what I've been doing for the past few years. I got several different side projects and irons in the oven, but my main work is facilitating the mission of Bishop Robert Barron at Word on Fire.
Well, I did notice that he became a bishop after he hired you, so somebody must have thought that was a brilliant.
I said, Holy Father, this guy needs to be made
Oh, you
a
used
bishop.
your connections.
Yeah.
Okay. On Facebook Live, folks are watching us on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Periscope, and welcome and hi to everybody who's doing that. Diana in, I believe it's Kalita, Ohio, is watching on Facebook Live, and she has a question for you, Brandon. Diana?
It is Kalida, Ohio.
Oh, Kalida, I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's my junior religion class, our CCD class tonight.
Oh, so you're
they
all
wanted to
watching?
call in.
Are you
We're
all watching?
watching.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we are.
Very cool.
I
Hi,
had to go to another
Kalida.
room so they could watch it. But their question was, we've been talking about going to college in a couple years, and they were like, how do they tell their friends away at college why they go to, we're a really small town, so they really don't know a lot of non-Catholics. What are they supposed to tell them why they are getting up and going to church at 8 o'clock in the morning or, making time to go to church?
Hey, thanks, Diana. That's a great question. It's one I think a lot of young people, if they're not asked it themselves, they certainly consider it themselves. Why am I going to Mass? Why should I wake up and go to church? I say a couple things. One, you need to take the context of the questioner into consideration. So if you're getting asked this question from Protestant friends, so friends who believe in the Bible, who believe in Jesus, then the answer you might give would be closer to saying something like, well, because Jesus told us to, because Jesus told us to eat and drink his body and blood and as Paul says, continue meeting together. So that'd be the answer I'd probably give to a Protestant. You would use the Bible itself to show why we're encouraged, in fact, commanded to keep the Lord's Day holy, and we do that through the Mass. Now, if I'm talking to maybe a more secular person who doesn't maybe even believe in God or believe that Jesus is God, then there would be a few steps before that. You might say something like, well, I go to Mass because it's the place where I encounter God in the deepest and most fulfilling way. And you would have to maybe explain how that perhaps takes place through receiving the Eucharist, through praying with the community, through worshiping God in spirit and in word. But I think it's a tricky question. There's no one answer because you really got to consider where the people asking you that are coming from and then adjust your answer as needed. So hopefully that helps a little.
Yeah. Can I throw one more in real quick?
Yes, you can.
They were wanting to also know about how do they keep their faith once they go and they're around all this? We keep telling them how it's going to be.
Yeah, I'd say number one. If you are a Catholic and you go off to college, get connected with other Catholic college students. Usually that means connecting with a college campus ministry, maybe a Newman Center. Maybe there are either Focus or Net missionaries on your campus. Whatever the case, get connected with other Catholics early. And if you're a parent, and you take your kid to orientation or to the first week, make that connection then. Don't assume that your child will figure things out on their own. Bring them to the college campus ministry and introduce them and get them plugged in. Because I saw over and again in my experience when I was exploring the Catholic Church at Florida State University, it was the Catholic campus ministry that drew me in. And for a lot of people there, they said, if it wasn't for this place, I would have lost my faith in college. And I'm sure that for many people, they did lose their faith because they didn't find that community. So that's number one. Do that before anything else, is find a Catholic group on campus and get plugged in early.
Diana?
Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And the kids have been talking about calling in, and this worked out perfect.
Oh, well, call anytime. That's really exciting that we've got your CCD class there. That's a very nice thing to hear from you. If I could offer one more resource to you, Aurora Griffin wrote a book called How I Stayed Catholic at Harvard. And that's from Ignatius Press. And maybe just head over to the Ignatius Press site and pick up How I Stayed Catholic at Harvard, because it does exactly what Brandon was just talking about. It walks you through all the things you can be connected to and all the ways you can maintain your Catholic faith in the midst of the academy, which is not always amenable to it. Thanks, Diana. Very happy to have you call. Call anytime. We go now to Jonathan in Lake Worth, California, listening or watching on YouTube Live. Jonathan, you're on with Brandon Vaught.
Oh, hello, guys. Hello, Brandon.
Hey, Jonathan. Good.
Yeah, so I got kind of like a two-part question. In the beginning, using exaggerations to get points across, is that okay? I heard once that people use exaggerations to get points across. Like, for example, this is out of my own intuition. Like, for example, against homosexuality, I use usually the argument, let's assume, like, we all became homosexual, and the homosexual relationship, obviously we can't conceive children. And so that would be against what Jesus said, I am the truth, the life, and the way. I think I said it incorrectly. But and so I haven't really read the Bible that much. I usually read it in pieces. Like, I jump around a lot. And but I do have a lot of mentors. So I get nervous when people say, well, where's that in the Bible? And so how much do I rely on my own intuition and the intuition of others?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jonathan. Sounds like there were maybe a few questions packed in there, so let me take them one at a time. So the first one you asked was, is it okay to use exaggerations? And I would offer a hesitant yes. You know, if we look at the Gospels, we see Jesus using hyperbole quite often to make his points. But I think there's a difference between a lie and an exaggeration. You know, if you're exaggerating something in a good way, then it tends to be more hyperbolic. You're just using that for rhetorical effect. But if we exaggerate things in the sense of maybe offering statistics that are a bit higher than what they are in reality in order to prove our point, that's probably a bad idea. Those sorts of exaggerations tend to come back and hurt you in the end. So that's one thing I'd say. Number two, you kind of said, what do I say to my friends if they say, where's that in the Bible? And I'm not super familiar with the Bible. I say a few things. One, if you go to Catholic.com, which is Catholic Answers website here, they have tons of articles and resources on the biblical basis for just about every Catholic doctrine under the sun. So if there's one in particular you're stumped on, go check out the Catholic Answers website. But second, my usual tendency, especially if I can't come up with a verse on the spot to answer that, is just to ask this simple question. Do you think that everything Christians should believe needs to be found in the Bible, that we can't believe anything that's not explicitly taught in the Bible? And if they say no, they don't believe that, then you say, oh, okay, then we don't need to find explicit biblical proof for every church teaching, and you're good to go. If they say yes, that you do need to find biblical proof for everything you believe, then you can just simply ask the follow-up question, where in the Bible does it teach that? Where in the Bible does it say that everything that you believe needs to be found in the Bible? And the answer is there's no verse that teaches that. And so that view is sort of self-contradictory, the sort of where is it in the Bible or the prove it from the Bible sort of view. So that's how I'd handle that. And then your last question was, where do you draw the line between relying on your own intuition and the intuition of mentors? And that's, I mean, a very general and abstract question. It'd be tough to give a good answer without getting into particularities. But I'd say the way you posed it almost answers itself, that you need to find a balance between what you believe and intuit and your gut feelings, and on the other hand, the advice that you're receiving from wise mentors, from priests, from friends, from other people around you. So it's probably a weak answer, but it's as best as I can give to a general question like that.
Thank you, Jonathan. We got to take a break right now, Brandon, and we'll be right back with more on how to share your faith with clarity, calm, and joy. Brandon Vaught is our guest. 888-318-7884 is the number. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and we'll be right back with more on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their Catholic values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
It may be true for you, but not for me. How often have you heard this during a discussion with friends or family? Whether talking about faith, morality, politics, or just the basic notion of truth, so many people are captive to the notion of relativism, the belief that reality is something we decide. In his new audio presentation, Your Truth, My Truth, apologist Carlo Broussard breaks down this intellectual cancer, looking at the different kinds of relativism we regularly encounter and demonstrating how, ultimately, they collapse under the weight of their own incoherence. More importantly, Carlo makes a powerful case for the existence of objective truth, showing you how to explain to others that right and wrong are both real and universal, because it was designed that way by God. Order your copy of Your Truth, My Truth by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
The Catholic Answers Minute. I'm Father Vincent Serpa. In Matthew 5:17, Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill." It is in the fulfilling of the law and prophets that he challenges all who hear him. He did not intend to fulfill the law by beginning with outward observance, as his fellow Jews were accustomed to expect. From this point forward, fulfillment of the law had to come from inside the person. Mere outward observance in itself would not be sufficient. Outward observance would have to reflect an inner disposition. So often he charged the scribes and Pharisees with appearing blameless on the outside, but inside being full of corruption and deceit. The kingdom of God demands much more. It demands purity of heart. "Blessed are the pure of heart," he was to say, "for they shall see God." To have a pure heart is to prefer nothing to him. I'm Father Vincent Serpa for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Brandon Vaught is our guest, the creator of Claritas U and the content director for Bishop Robert Barron's Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. 888-318-7884 is the number. And as I said before, Brandon, people are watching on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Periscope. And Aaron from Facebook Live typed the following question to you. What do you say, Brandon, to Catholics who say, "I don't discuss my faith because it is private"?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think over the last generation, a lot of us have been led to believe that faith is just something personal and private. It's indecipherable from just an opinion or a preference, such as, I got my favorite foods, you got your favorite foods, but I don't go around blabbering about what I want to eat for dinner tonight. That's my own private, decision. But I think we got to push back against that. And there are several ways to do that, I think, gently. So one of them would be if you're talking with a fellow Christian, so either a Catholic or a Protestant or someone from the Eastern Orthodox tradition, I would point to the Bible, which over and over again in the New Testament encourages us to be public, prophetic, and bold in speaking about our faith, and it traces right back to Jesus's command at the Great Commission. He didn't say go around the world and be private about your faith. He said go around the world preaching everything that I've taught you, baptizing people in my name. So I think there's clear biblical warrant to be open about our faith. But another thing I would say to people who say, oh, my faith is just a private thing, is I would say, and I get this from Bishop Barron, he says, we don't speak that way about any other thing that we care deeply about. Take, for example, politics. You will almost never meet a person who has deeply convicted views about politics, but then says, well, I just keep them to myself. I'm private about them. The only people that keep their political opinions to themselves generally are people who don't really feel deeply or strongly either way. They're not deeply convicted. But if you believe that one political decision or orientation is better for society than another, you're compelled to speak out because you know that it'll help people. And I think the same thing's true about our Catholic faith, that if you really believe that your Catholic faith is good for other people, that becoming Catholic, falling in love with Jesus, meeting him in the sacraments is good for them, then you want to tell as many people as you can about it. And if you don't feel that way, then we got a bigger problem than just being private about your faith.
We go now to Marcia in Elkhart, Indiana, listening on Redeemer Radio. Marcia, what's your question for Brandon Vaught?
My question is, I was a Vatican II era kid, and I felt like when Vatican II came about, a lot of the CCD teachers and everyone didn't really know for sure what they were supposed to be teaching. It seemed like they didn't know what changes there were and what they were supposed to teach us. And I don't know if other people are like me, but I don't feel like I got a lot of things. I've had to go to our CIA. I've gone through our CIA 3 times now, but part of the time it's been sponsoring others. Just to be able to try to get a grip on my faith.
Yep.
And I just don't know if other people felt the same way.
Yeah, in my experience, talking with thousands of other Catholics, Marcia, I'll say you're not alone. I think that's pretty typical of your generation of Catholics. And I say this to our discredit, that I think after the Second Vatican Council, a lot more emphasis was placed on the experiential and the psychological dimensions of Catholicism, and not a lot on the catechetical and the evangelistic. And so we're seeing, I think, the fruit of a large generation that has discounted the reasons to believe what we believe. So I'd recommend a few things. It sounds like you're on the right track if you've attended RCIA 3 times, either as yourself or as a sponsor. That will help, undoubtedly. But I would also encourage you to seek out good Catholic resources. Again, I'd look at things like Catholic Answers, the website, the podcast. I'd mention things like wordonfire.org, which is Bishop Robert Barron's YouTube channel. There are tons of great Catholic websites, podcasts, blogs. All that will help you start feeling more clear and confident about what you believe. And then, without tooting my own horn too much here, we've mentioned a few times, I have my own online program called Claritas U that was really designed for people just like you, who are passionate about their faith but don't quite sure know how to articulate it. And so we have specific courses on atheism, on same-sex marriage, on the Bible, on science, all these videos that'll help you get up to speed quickly and start feeling more confident that you can share it and express it with others. So those would be some good places to start, Marcia.
Yeah, I kind of live in the, excuse me for saying so, but in the Mennonite Amish area, and they're great ones for quoting the Bible constantly.
Sure.
Everything is a quote. They know all the stuff right off the top of their heads. And there was a Mennonite pastor who came to my class, like in the 4th grade, something like that, and would give kids candy for memorizing verses and all this kind of thing. And my mother got mad and made me sit out in the hall. She wouldn't let me sit in on the classes. So I didn't even learn any of those through them. And now I'm old enough that it's hard for me to read these things and get them to stick. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Brandon, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I totally get that. As with learning anything, it comes through repetition. So you listen to shows like this, you read articles, you read books as much as you can. I know it's hard. You watch videos, and the more you hear the truths of the Catholic faith, the more deeply they'll stick. So make repetition your goal, and I think you'll improve.
And try out Claritas U. You don't know. ClaritasU.com is where you go for that. We go now. Hello, Margot in Naperville, Illinois, watching on Facebook Live. You are on with Brandon Vaught.
Hi, Brandon. Hi.
Hey, Margot.
How are you guys doing?
Good, Margot.
Great.
This is Brandon's personal assistant, or at least with Claritas U. So it's great to talk with you guys. And Brandon, my question is, what about with family members? How do you stay calm when you just want to see your siblings or your parents or your cousins return to the faith? Do you happen to have a book or anything that maybe you've written or someone else has written that is specifically for family members?
Yeah, good question, Margot. Great to hear from you. I'd say a few things. One, I think it's always hardest to evangelize and discuss the faith with family members. I think of our Lord's statement where he says a prophet's not welcome in his hometown. And who did Jesus have the most difficulty engaging? People who knew him growing up, who thought they knew what he was all about and were therefore closed off to whatever he had to say. So for those reasons, it can be often difficult for us to share our faith with our own family members. But I say a few things. Let me mention a couple good books. Patrick Madrid has a great book on helping family members in particular, come back to the faith. It's called Search and Rescue. So if you got maybe a cousin, a father, a niece, maybe some sort of relative who you'd like to draw back to the church, get that book. It's a great walkthrough of some tips and tactics to draw back family members. And then second, I'll mention my own book. I wrote a book a couple years ago called Return, How to Draw Your Child Back to the Church. Now, that book's a little different than Patrick's because it focuses specifically on the parent-child relationship, which is unique. If you're a parent and and you're trying to draw back a fallen away son or daughter, you got to engage the situation a little differently than you might with a parent or a niece or another relative. So those would be two good books to get. But I just encourage a lot of people with family situations in a few ways. I'd say you're not alone, so don't despair. Second, pray, pray, pray. Even if the relationship's ruptured, even if you have a hard time talking with your fallen away family member, pray for them. And then finally, pick up one of those two books, because I think either one of them will be a big help to you.
I thank you so much, Brandon, and I just encourage everyone to just head over right now to ClaritasU.com, sign up. We have about 1,200 people already in the forums, and I'd love to see you guys all there.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you. It's
Great.
very nice to hear your voice, Margot. We go now to Mary in LeBlanc, Louisiana, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Mary, you are on with Brandon Vaught.
Hi.
Hi, Mary. What's your question for Brandon?
Well, I'm married to somebody that's not Catholic, and he's pretty anti-Catholic, And so in years past, we've talked about the faith and everything, but it usually ended in an argument. And so when I talk about my faith, it's really personal, and I get emotional a lot of times. And so I was just wondering how I might talk about the faith in a way that wouldn't be emotional,
Yeah, thank you for that. And I sympathize with you. I know how difficult it must be. I've heard from many people who are in the same situation with a spouse. And I got to say that it seems to me from what I hear, that's the most deeply distressing situation when you have a spouse who is not just ambivalent toward your Catholic faith, but is a bit antagonistic toward it. I'd say a few things. One, everything I just said to Margot would hold here as well. Check out one of those two books, either Search and Rescue or Return. I think you'll find some helpful tips in there. Second, pray for your husband. Think here of St. Monica. Most people remember St. Monica for helping to convert her son, St. Augustine, but a lot of people forget that she also converted her husband, who was a staunch atheist, who openly mocked her faith, who didn't want to have anything to do with it. But she prayed for years, just as she did for her son, and was able to eventually win over her husband as well. So read the story of Monica. I think you'll find some great inspiration there. And then finally, I think you've sort of sounded the right approach in what I've heard you say, that you got to be delicate. You don't want to push too hard. I think that's the right way, at least for the near future. Instead of trying to convince your husband to be Catholic or be too in his face about it, you might delicately show how the faith is improving your life. You might express the joy that you get from your faith. You might serve him without expecting anything in return. For you, maybe the way in might not be arguments from reason. It might not be that he's particularly drawn to some beautiful element of the Catholic faith, but maybe he's drawn in by the goodness of Catholicism that he sees born in your own life. So those would be some general tips I would give. But most of all, I'd encourage you, don't despair. Don't despair. There's lots of people in your position. We can all pray for each other. And I think we have saints in heaven like Monica who can pray for us too.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for that call. We go now to Scott in Rochester, New York. Scott, you are on with Brandon Vaught.
Hello. My question would be, I have had to discuss my faith with other people and with less than success. But when I discussed it, I always remembered that God puts the words in my mouth. And it worked.
Scott, I'm sorry I put you on too late, but I think that's a great point to end on. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, the Holy Spirit is always with us, giving us the words to speak and the courage to speak them. So you're never alone.
Amen, brother. Brandon Vaught, thanks so much for being with us today on Catholic Answers Live.
Thanks, Cy. It was a great time.
And great to have you. This is Catholic Answers Live. We do it all again tomorrow, but it's open forum tomorrow. So if you've got some question about the life of the Catholic Church, the Catholic faith, or any aspect of the life of religion or morals, please give us a call tomorrow when we do open forum on Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. This is Catholic Answers Live, and we will be back tomorrow.